Hello everyone and welcome to not one but two games from yesterday's semifinals of the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam tournament in Las Vegas. We're going to check out the second game between Levon, Arjun and Arjun Erigaisi. You all know what happened in game one. Levon won a very nice game. It was not very nice for Arjun, but one has to win, and Arjun was better for the better part of the game. He didn't capitalize on it, and then Levon just had that one opportunity where he took control and won the game. Now, this means that Arjun now has to win with black in order to force tiebreaks. So let's see what happened. You have this very interesting position where you have the bishops, the knights, and then the heavy artillery all the way on the king side, which means that to castle king side, you merely have to develop the queen, and then already you can castle king side, and to castle queen side, you will have to get rid of most of your pieces. So that's the deal. Levon with white opens with pawn to d4. We have pawn to f5. Again, makes sense. You want to open up the queen. Levon's pawn to d4. I guess it's you have to be a Levon to play this. He doesn't open up the bishops. He doesn't open up the queen. He doesn't open up the rook. So he just plays a pawn that opens really nothing. Which if you're an e4 player, looks kind of odd. But okay, he has an idea. We have pawn to c4, now opens up the light square bishop, and pawn to b6. Arjun does the same. We have pawn to e4, f captures, and bishop captures on e4. We have bishop captures and rook captures. And you could say, okay, Levon is leading the match. Trading down definitely goes in his favor. He gets the light square bishops off the board. The rook on e4 is already very nicely positioned, so he can be very happy. We have pawn to c6, opening up the dark square bishop, and pawn to b3. Levon does the same. We have queen to f5 and rook back to e1. We have castles kingside. Like we said, you only have to develop the queen to castle kingside, castles queenside, and knight to d3. We have pawn to d5, and now knight to e3, as it comes with tempo, so very useful. Queen back to d7 and queen to e2. Developing the queen, also ready to castle kingside. Pawn to e6 and castles kingside. We have knight to e7 by Arjun, knight to g4. And now you can see that one of Levon's knights, or both of them, are coming to e5. We have knight to g6, and now bishop to b2. A very Levon-like move. He wants to have bishop to a3 as an option to sort of ruin harmony between black's pieces, and Arjun should just let it happen. He shouldn't react to this. He should just go knight to f4 and continue the game. But he plays bishop to d6 sort of to stop that, but it doesn't really do anything, as the bishop will have to capture on e5 at some point. So Levon goes right away. Knight g to e5, captures, and now if you don't want to allow this powerful knight to remain on e5, you have to give it up. Bishop captures on e5, and the queen captures on e5, thus making bishop to d6 perhaps a loss of a tempo. But again, who knows? At this level, the players are much too strong to comment on their moves as being a loss of a tempo. Knight to f7 and queen back to e2, followed by knight to h6. Now the knight is eyeing that f5 square, where it's going to be very strong. On the other hand, Levon has a very good bishop that probably will go to a3 or c1, as it doesn't look like this d pawn is going to move. He does have the weak e6 pawn to work with, and it's not going to be easy. Arjun has to win this in order to force tie breaks. We have queen to d3. Rook to f6, adding a defender here, but also preparing to go after the white king. We have pawn to f3 and the knight to f5. Now, the pawn on f3 has weakened e3 and g3, so that knight is looking very nice. Probably Levon will not invest in a g4 to weaken his king just to get rid of the knight from there. We have rook to f2. Now you can double up on the e file easily. And pawn to h5. Arjun has to go for it. We have pawn to g3 and pawn to h4. Pawn to g4. Levon will now he has to advance it. He doesn't want to open up any files in front of his king. Knight back to e7. We have bishop to c1. Now the bishop looking at that g5 square to go after the rook and the pawn. And knight to g6. Arjun invites it. We have bishop to g5 and now knight to f4, attacking Levon's queen, but also threatening knight to h3 check to fork the rook and the king. And Levon should play something like queen to f1, But again, should is a strong word when commenting on such elite players. Bishop captures on f4. Probably if this was the first game and Levon had the white pieces, he would go queen to f1, but as he's already up in the match, he only needs to hold the draw to win the match. Bishop captures on f4 will do. Rook captures on f4, and now queen to e3, attacking and preparing to put even more pressure on that e6 pawn. We have queen to f7, and c captures on d5. We have c captures on d5 and pawn to h3. You could also consider a move like king to g2. Point being that if king g2 and let's say queen f6 going after that d4 pawn, you can just go rook d2. And now if let's say rook f8 putting pressure on f3, you can play rook d3. And now this rook is doing a fine job defending everything. There are no weaknesses here, and you can use this rook to roam around or to defend. So also not a bad idea. Levon found a different way. He played pawn to h3, queen to f6, again going after the pawn, and now he goes rook e to d1. Now this rook cannot move as the f3 pawn would fall. So rook d1, and now rook to c8. Rook to f8, again nothing, just rook d3, and everything is nicely defended. So rook c8, might as well use the only open file on the board. King to g2 and pawn to b5. You have to push something, otherwise nothing will happen. a3, we have pawn to a5, rook to e2. Putting pressure on the e6 pawn, we have pawn to b4. Saying, you capture that, I'm going to have a passed pawn. Levon says, no, thank you. A captures, and rook to d3. Again, just consolidating, not giving Arjun anything to work with. Rook c6 and the queen back to d2. Putting pressure on the b4 pawn. We have queen to f8 defending, and now queen to e1. Levon attacking the h4 pawn, the b4 pawn. Arjun defends with queen to e7. Also, both pawns are now guarded, and rook d to e3. And look at this. I mean, if you're Arjun here, this is not where you want to be. Levon has created an Alekhin's gun on the e-file, putting pressure on that e6 pawn, the queen attacking h4, the queen attacking b4. This is does not look like a game that you're about to win. He goes king to f7. He has to have everything defended, and Levon just goes queen to d2 with some ideas of maybe captures, and then the rook on f4 will fall. So rook back to f6 and queen back to e1. Levon says, I'm happy with a draw. If you are as well, you know, let's call it a day, and I go to the finals. Arjun says, no, we play on. Pawn to g5. But this also weakens the black king a little bit, and Levon tries to exploit it. Queen b1, going for queen to h7. King g7, and now rook e5, just winning more space. We have rook to f4. Arjun does the same, and queen back to e1, putting pressure on the e6 pawn. King f7, and again queen b1 going after queen to h7, and Arjun now allows it. Queen to f6. So okay, nothing to be done about this. Queen to h7 with check, and now you have to play queen g7, but then Levon just repeats, and there's no way for you to make any progress. So if Arjun does not want to call it a day, he has to allow Levon some chances as well. So that's how chess works. He plays king to f8, and Levon says, all right, thank you. Queen to d7. Queen to b7 is also very nice. He goes after the rook here, and now rook to c3, putting pressure on the b3 pawn. And the question is what to play here. The position is now winning for Levon, but only if you can see very far into the future will you find the winning idea. Have at it while I give you a couple of seconds. Of course, all of you can see the hanging e6 pawn. That's really no secret, but you cannot capture it right away. You first have to give a check, and you have to give a check on d6. No other move works. Only queen to d6 wins the game. And just to give you a quick example, if you go rook captures on e6, then Arjun wins on the spot with rook captures on g4. This is what he prepared. It doesn't matter which pawn captures because the queen is coming to f3, queen to f3 check, king g1, queen g3 check, king h1, queen captures on h3, king g1, and now rook to g3 check, and the king hunt is over fairly quickly. Rook f3, king to e1, queen to f1 check, rook to f1 check, king d2, and queen to c3 will be checkmate. So that's the idea. After queen to d6 check, the sequence no longer exists. We have king to g7, and rook captures on e6, and now the same idea no longer applies. Arjun tries it because there's really nothing else to do. Rook captures on g4, f captures, queen to f3 check. We have king to g1, but now there's no queen g3. Levon made sure of that by giving queen to d6 check, as have all of you, as you guys are amazing players. Rook to c1 check. We have rook to e1, and he was in this position on move 50 that Arjun Erigaisi resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. There are no checks. Everything is covered. This is covered. This is covered. If you trade a pair of rooks, again, no checks. So it's only a matter of giving white a move, and then rook e7, queen to d8 will be checkmate. That's all there is to it. So yeah, I mean, what a player, Levon Aronian, eliminating Magnus to just get to the quarterfinals. So he removed all of the chances Magnus had of winning the tournament. Then he eliminated Hikaru Nakamura, and now he eliminated Arjun Erigaisi. All that's left is to eliminate whoever is now in the finals, and we're gonna see who goes into the finals as we check out the game. Fabiano Caruana versus Hans Niemann. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the match. So first two games ended in a draw. In game one, Fabi was pushing a little bit, but nothing too serious. Game two was a dead draw. Game three, Fabi was winning most of the game with the black pieces, but Hans managed to, remove all the advantage that Fabi had over the course of, let's say, 20 moves. If you check the engine, it was like Fabi's +5, then +5, plus 4.5, then +3, then +2.5, then +1, then plus nothing, and in the end, they had to draw the game, and this is now game 4. So either it's a draw and then they go into further tiebreaks, or whoever wins this goes into the final match to face none other than Levon Aronian. So yeah, let's check it out. Fabi with white opens with pawn to f4. Fabi has eliminated Javokir Sindarov from the quarterfinals, and Hans, of course, Fabi has eliminated Pragnananda, and Hans has eliminated Javokir Sindarov, and now they face each other. So pawn to f4. Interestingly, the engine already says that this is an inaccuracy by Fabi, but at this level, I don't think it is possible to exploit such an idea. I mean, there's a rook on f1, and it makes sense to push f4. So let's see what happens. We have pawn to g6 and bishop to f2. Already thinking about snatching a pawn on a7, knight to b6 by Hans, and pawn to c4. We have pawn to d6, stopping any pawn to c5, pawn to g3, opening up the light square bishop as well, knight f6 by Hans, and we have pawn to h3, stopping any knight g4 ideas, but also, it's a useful move later on. You might want to play g4, g5. We have bishop to d7, putting pressure on h3, and pawn to g4. Fabi just prevents that. We have castles kingside, and now pawn to d3. So, okay, very nice position. Hans's position could be a little bit better. Fabi really opened up with those pawns. But pawn to h5. Hans not worried about anything. He doesn't care who he's playing against. He just wants to make all the best moves. And pushing pawns in front of your king usually is not a very good idea. Here it's actually very good because Fabi would have to play g captures on h5. And then after knight captures, he would have to play bishop f3, go after the knight. And then when the knight moves, you have h4, h5. And then you're going to break through on the king side. But Fabi actually closes the position with pawn to g5, saying, okay, you move the knight and then I'm going to consolidate. But Fabi missed something here. And it's a very unlike a player of Fabi's strength to miss something like this. But it's a very tiring event. He played like 7 games against Pragnananda. What did Fabi miss here? I'm sure you guys see it, without even pausing the video. So I'm going to show it. Bishop captures on h3. Fabi forgot that the rook on f1 is undefended. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe he just decided to sacrifice a pawn. Who knows? Rook to e1, and now Hans just goes knight back to e8. We have knight captures on h3, queen captures on h3, and knight b3. Maybe this is Fabi's plan. He gives up a pawn, he has the bishop pair, and he can maybe attack that king. Maybe some f5 in the future, rook g1. Who knows? Okay, we have pawn to c5. Bishop to f3. Now making room for that rook to come to h1. We have queen back to d7 by Hans and the rook to h1. So this could actually be what Fabi was going for. Maybe queen c2, the position somehow opens up, you sacrifice the bishop on h5 and you checkmate the black king on h7. Maybe something like that. We have knight to a4 by Hans, queen to c2. Now preparing to maybe even move the knight. That knight could be a little bit weak if the queen moves from d7. Knight to c7, and now knight to a5. And this was actually a pretty good position if Fabi had such plans of maybe capturing on h5. For example, g captures, you're going to go d4, you open up the queen, and after f5, because everything else is worse, you will go g captures on f6, and after rook captures, you will play rook captures on h5. And okay, the position opens up. It's not easy to defend this with black. Something like, let's say, king f7, rook to g8, but yeah, maybe not a bad idea for Fabi. But he is lower on time, so yeah, it's hard to say. Fabi goes knight to a5, and now we have knight to e6. We have pawn to e3 and the rook f to c8 by Hans, king to e2, and now pawn to b5. Hans, playing a very principled chess, says, okay, you have a king on e2. We have to open up the position. That's how chess works. C captures on b5. We have rook captures on b5, now attacking the knight, and knight just goes back to c4. We have knight to b6, offering a trade, and Fabi just plays b3. Pawn to d5. Hans adamant about opening up the center. We have knight captures on b6, rook captures on b6, and now bishop to g3, followed by knight to g7. Now Hans wants to get the knight to f5. King to f1, we have knight to f5 and bishop to f2, guarding e3 and g3, so basically controlling the knight on f5. Pawn to e5. There's nothing to be done other than to open up the position. Fabi's king is on f1, and Hans's king is safely tucked away on g8, protected by an army of pawns. Later on, maybe rook f8, f6, you open up the f file. So not easy to defend this for Fabi. We have f captures on e5, bishop captures on e5, and now queen to d2, defending on e3. And waiting to see what, also getting the queen off of the c file, waiting to see what Hans does. But Hans just continues pushing. Pawn to d4. Pawn to e4 by Fabi, but now knight g7. Yes, you kick away the knight from f5, but now you have weakened the f4 square, and that knight cannot come to f4. We have bishop to g2, rook to f8. Also looking at that f6 to open up the f file for the rook. Bishop to h3, attacking Hans's queen, queen to d6. We have rook to g1, bishop to f4. Hans just winning more space, preparing bishop to e3. Queen e2, we have queen to e5 and king to g2, trying to give up that g5 pawn to maybe do something along the g file. Hans says, I will capture it, but first let me improve my position. There's nothing you can do to stop me from capturing it. So knight e6, king h1, and knight captures on g5, attacking the bishop and bishop to f1. Fabi's position looking... well, incredibly sad. We have rook to f6. Hans brings another attacker into the game. Rook to b2. Fabi tries to create some sort of a defensive perimeter along the second rank. We have king g7. Beautiful attacking move by Hans. He's preparing to push the h-pawn, and then rook h8 is coming if the pawn is ever captured. Rook to c2. Pawn to h4. We have rook to g4, putting pressure on the pawn, but Hans doesn't care. Bishop to e3. And it seems like you're just giving up a pawn, but the bishop on f1 is a big problem for Fabi. We have bishop captures on h4, rook to h8, and now king to g2. Unpinning, and the bishop, okay, is defended on h4, and Hans just breaks through completely. Rook captures on h4, we have rook captures on h4, and knight to f3. Attacking the rook, and... what can Fabi do? Best probably would be just to give up the queen, but even this is insufficient as a nice queen to f6 check, and you either lose the rook or the bishop on f1. That bishop on f1 is the biggest problem piece for Fabi. If you could just move it somewhere, might be better, but yeah. Rook to h3, getting the rook out of harm's way, and now Hans goes knight to g5. Just for fun, I will show queen g5, but Hans wasn't looking for a perfect move, as he has 7 minutes. Fabi is below a minute. Queen g5 is just game over. If you go rook g3, then knight h4 check. You cannot go to the f file, and you have to defend the rook with the king. So king h2, and now just bishop to f4, and that's it. You resign here. So Hans went knight to g5. Also, it's not that difficult to play when every move is winning. Rook to g3 and knight to e6. Now preparing knight f4 to win the game on the spot. So queen g4 and rook to f4. Kicking away the white queen, queen back to d1, and rook h4. Hans just... forcing Fabi to put his pieces on disgusting squares. Rook f2. Fabi hoping that Hans gives up the bishop to alleviate the pressure a little bit. Hans says, no thank you, just knight f4 check. And the problem is if you go king f3, queen h5, it's game over. If you go king to g1, then of course knight e2 check, and again it's game over. Both the queen and the knight are attacking that g3 rook. You're going to capture, and that's it. So here after knight f4 check, Fabi said, all right, finally I get get rid of some of my material to survive the attack. Bishop captures on f4, getting ready to capture the rook on g3, rook h3, and queen g5 check. King to h1, and now rook captures on h3. With check, we have bishop captures on h3, and now again every move is winning. Hans plays the most precise one, queen g3, and he was in this position. On move 49, that Fabiano Caruana resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So first two games ended in a draw. Game 3, that Fabi was really winning for the better part of the game. Also, Hans managed to draw, and now he gave Hans a chance, and Hans took it and did not give anything back. There's no defense. Either you lose the bishop or you get checkmated. It's impossible to cover both h3 and h2. And the only reasonable thing to do here is to resign the game. So yeah, Fabi is eliminated, and it will be Levon Aronian versus Hans Niemann in the finals of the Freestyle Chess Grand Slam tournament in Las Vegas. And I checked out the stats a little bit. They've faced each other quite a few times. Levon and Hans played 6 classical games up to this point. They've both won 1, and 4 of the games were a draw. So in classical, they are tied. In rapid, which is more important as this is rapid chess, Levon is leading by 1 point. So in rapid games, Levon has defeated Hans 11 times, and Hans has defeated Levon 10 times, with 11 games ending in a draw. So yeah, I mean, Levon is a little bit of a favorite here. It's hard to say because now Hans is much, much stronger than he was before, when, most people, were just beating him. And another thing, Levon is just playing on a whole different level this tournament. This is creative chess. This is where Levon thrives. He eliminated Hikaru, he eliminated Magnus, he eliminated Arjun. Can he eliminate Hans, or will Hans just obliterate everyone as he has announced before the tournament? We'll see, but this is definitely going to be a great final. And I know a lot of you guys were hoping for a Hans versus Magnus match or a Hans versus Hikaru match, but I think Levon facing Hans is the way to go. I would say Levon is the chosen one when it comes to scrambled chess. Can Hans do anything about it? We'll see. He says, I don't think there is anything that can stop me now. Will Levon be that anything? We'll see. So yeah, very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun weekend. And yeah, I would like to thank Nick Lynn, Paul Hinamund, Ricardo Cardona Lopez, James White, and Robert Palande for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your weekend.